Can you start with your name, your graduating class, and your current positions at Pingree?
Sure. My name is David Fahey. I graduated from Pingree in 1999. I'm currently the Assistant Director of Operations and Strategic Initiatives. I've been in that role for about a year now. Prior to that, for 5 or so years, I was the school's Director of Alumni Relations and other jobs that related to fundraising.
Could you describe your Pingree experience as a student here?
Amazing, empowering. I am the last of 6 children, and I am the only one that got to go to Pingree. The first 5 all went to a terrific public school in the town that we grew up in, but I was blessed and rewarded with the opportunity to come here, and just tried to do my best to really understand that I was being given something special, and to soak it all in. And I think I did that to some degree, not to the degree that I wish I had, but still to a great degree. So it was an amazing experience that I was really, really, really honored to have. And it was because of that experience that I always had such a strong desire to come back to the institution and try to perpetuate that experience for the kids that get to come here today.
What was the honor code like back then?
It was very much like it is today. I mean, the honor code was the same. The tone and tenor of the honor code was slightly different in that the school today very, very explicitly talks about the honor code and educates about the honor code and incorporates, honor code ceremony, pomp and circumstance, whereas the school then, it was more of an implicit, implied undertone. So it was relevant, and it was very much part of the fabric of the community, but it wasn't necessarily one that was discussed to the extent that it is today in a formal fashion. There were certain classes, particularly at that point, the headmaster John Hanley, taught a class that dealt with ethical dilemmas, and I'm sure it was discussed in every classroom at times. But the way that the student body has really, really made it a front and center topic of conversation today. Is different and impressive.
What are some of the other differences you see between being a Pingree student back then and working as a Pingree faculty now?
Well, Pingree has strived for the last decade, give or take, to become a place that is much more like the outside world in terms of socioeconomic diversity. So this institution today that I'm very proud to be a part of as an employee is a different place in that it's a better place to prepare students for what they're going to be like, what life is going to be like in the real world. This institution today just provides so much greater breadth and depth of socioeconomic diversity, of cultural education and awareness. This place is becoming, it's still not there, but we're striving to get there, but it's becoming every day more and more like a microcosm of the real world, as opposed to a place that only the select few maybe were able to access. And when I was here as a student, there was, a beginning, but a very small level of socioeconomic and cultural diversity. And, that has improved greatly to this day, greatly to this day.
What do you think are some of the extra steps that we need to take to reach kind of that microcosm state that you described?
Well, I think we're well on that way right now. I think that there's a holistic commitment that needs to happen, which has happened. The leadership of an institution has to decide they want it to be a certain way in order for it to get there, and then they need to have the resources and have the focus and empower the right people. And that's all where we are now. It takes a while. It takes a long time to make a seismic change to an institution or to improve an institution, from that perspective. And we are doing that, and we have been doing that now, as I said, for 10 years or so, more. So, what does Pingree need to do? Pingree needs to continue on the path that it's now on. Pingree needs to continue to, think very, very, very strategically about all the decisions that we make, so that it continues to have the right effects and impacts on the institution in the future. This campaign that the school recently closed, the Blueprint for the Future campaign, was hugely important to that. In that, the single largest fundraising priority for that endeavor was financial aid. And at an institution of the cost, the level of magnitude of cost of this school and all of our peer schools, we're frankly no more expensive than our peer schools. But at that level of cost, the school needs to work tremendously hard to create an environment where not only people that can afford to come here, but also people that can't afford. And they don't feel scared or afraid to apply for financial aid. And they don't feel scared or afraid to matriculate, despite the fact that they maybe can't afford to write the check themselves and are receiving financial aid. And then, perhaps most importantly, and the place where a lot of schools miss, and we're doing so well and working so hard not to miss, mostly through the leadership and work of Dr. Artis, but also, of course, because of other members of the admin team and leaders at the school, is making sure that once a student is here, that he or she feels a part of the community, comfortable, included, a part of it, as opposed to feeling like, they wear a scarlet letter, they're different, they're unique because of the fact that their family's financial or other, but generally financial situation puts them in a different, stratosphere or economic class than some portion of their classmates. And that's the really, really, really hard work. That's the work that's done, at the lowest levels of awareness. It's in the education, and it's something that the school has done, in my opinion, has done really, really well at for the last decade or so, and is focusing on for the future.
How do you think the honor code plays into that kind of work, or just in your day-to-day life working at Pingree?
I think that's a great question. I think the honor code plays into that work tremendously, but in almost a secret way, a silent way. The honor code is all about doing what's right and looking out for your fellow student, prioritizing. There's a part of the honor code that speaks about prioritizing the community over the individual, and that this topic of conversation that you and I are currently on is very much in that same vein. The institution is working so hard to create the possibility for people to come here and be a part of this community and this family that wouldn't otherwise be. And that in itself is such an honorable act, because, could we as an institution step back, give away, no financial aid or less financial aid, and then do perhaps more with the financial resources, do other with those financial resources, pay teachers more money or build bigger buildings or whatever you want? Yes, but the school has made the commitment and the decision that not only to benefit kids that receive financial aid, but to benefit those of them that don't on campus, and the faculty and staff that are on campus, to create that rich, diverse, and inclusive community. I think that right there is such an honorable measure that the institution takes and is implied in the actual text of what our honor code says.
What are some of your favorite things about Pingree, beyond just Pingree's mission to give those students financial opportunity, and then providing them a community for when they come here?
One of my favorite things about Pingree is that, well, I'm going to answer this in two different parts. Okay. One of my favorite things about Pingree is that our faculty, staff, coaches, advisors, every title you can label anyone, are so committed to the kids. I just think it's, when I hear colleagues talk about their schools, when I speak to friends and family about their schools, I feel like everybody who's a teacher does it because they care about the kids. But everybody who does it at Pingree does it because they just so desperately want to be a part of and help shape kids that are going to change the world. And I think that's unique. I think that's a very special part of this institution, that our people are so committed. No one works at Pingree for the money. That's not what it's about. I mean, very few people work in education for the money, but anyone who educates at Pingree could go and educate anywhere else, and in many cases for more money, whether that's an even more prestigious prep school, a boarding school, etc., or whether that's public schools which pay higher salaries, or higher education. But the people that choose to be here because the salaries are reasonable, commensurate with peers, but because of the opportunity that they get to be with the kids that they get to be with. That's what's so special and unique. So that is the primary thing for me that I think is so amazing and so special at Pingree and makes me want to be a part of it. And similarly, I'd say that because we're an independent school, because we're not, governed by state legislature, because we don't have to teach to specific tests, because we don't have to meet specific criteria, we can function at a level like a business where we can take the opportunity to review ourselves, weekly, yearly, and decide, what are we doing well? What are we doing poorly? What changes do we need to make? How can we improve? Is there some new cutting edge, pedagogy or resource that we should be, considering adopting? It gives us the opportunity to be lean and to make changes and to make movements in a way that public schools can't, and maybe some other peer independent schools can't either. I'm not certain. But now that I've spent this last year in a different position, in a position where I work very closely with the school's chief financial officer and the school's head of school, I'm just continually impressed every day with the level of detailed thought, strategy, planning, data analysis that goes into the decision making here. And I would venture to guess that it is nowhere near as in-depth and as thorough and as researched and strategic at many other places because of the capabilities, the resources, the people we have here, and again, the commitment that we have from our leaders and from our faculty and staff to shape young minds that will make huge impacts on the world someday.
Can you talk about your work, starting with work in alumni relations and being a major gifts officer, and then to your position now?
Sure. So when I was a student at Pingree, I was profoundly impacted by both Miller Blari, who is the head soccer coach and was at that time, and by his assistant, a gentleman named Adam Rohde. So Adam Rohde was the assistant soccer coach and was the head of the upper school. So he was very similar to what Miss Chatterjee now is. Dr. Artist previously. I'm sorry, not Dr. Artist. Dr. Brown Allen, excuse me. So those two gentlemen made such a significant impact on me that I thought it would be amazing to try to come back and give some of that back to the school, to the students in the future. So I came back after college thinking that I would just be here for a year or two and would go and practice law, which was my intention. So I did that. I came back. I worked in the alumni office as an assistant director of alumni relations, coached a couple sports. And then after a year and a half, I resigned my position because I had been accepted to law school and I was going to go to law school the next fall. And I wanted to see another side of Pingree. So that at that point, I resigned my position in the alumni office so that I could do substitute teaching because I wanted the chance to be in the classroom. So I did that for the remainder of the year. And then I traveled. And then I went to law school. And I went to law school, acting under the hope and belief that being a lawyer would allow me to, change the world, help people, solve problems. And while it may have the short period of time that I spent in practice as a lawyer, I constantly said to myself, I wonder if I could be doing more at Pingree. And that's why I came back after 4 years, 3.5 years of law school, and then 2 years of practicing law, the whole time remaining involved in Pingree as an alumni volunteer and as a soccer coach, and for some of that time period, a lacrosse coach. I came back, and I came back full time, and I moved into the development office at a time when the school was beginning a very significant fundraising campaign that I knew I could be helpful with because of my connections to the alumni community and because of my position as a coach and an alum. So I was honored to come back, and I was honored and loved working on that campaign for those years and doing all the other work that we did as an alumni office to create engagement and connections and institute some great projects that now continue to this day, like our professional affinity groups, alumni networking, mentoring, growing career day, etc. And then at the end of that campaign, when I was interested in some career growth and some new opportunities and learning new sides of the business, it just so happened that an opening, where I currently sit, was created as my predecessor was leaving to become the chief financial officer of another school. So, I had a conversation with the head of school and with the CFO about this job and learned what it entailed and asked them if they would give me the opportunity to try it, because I thought that I could be good at it and I thought I could try to help them and help the school. And I'm now 1 year into it and very much enjoying it and do feel like I'm making, some impact and providing some level of help to the institution, which is really my goal in being an employee here.
What do you think are the different impacts practicing law in comparison to your position now?
Well, that's a very hard question. When in the type of, so there's so many different kinds of practice of law. I was not a generalist. I worked in a very specific area of the bar. I did one thing and one thing only. And in that practice of law, I helped people. I helped individuals at times, but it was not without conflict. And very often, in my particular practice of law, there's kind of a zero-sum game. So if I was helping my client, in the most general sense of terms, I don't know if harming is the right word, but not helping the adversary. And that just didn't feel great to me. So alternatively, being here, I feel like the decisions that I help make, the research that I do, the proposals that I put forth, ultimately will help, maybe 1,000 kids. Maybe only 20 if we're talking about a soccer team, or maybe only 100 if we're talking about a grade. But if it's the entire institution, it's the entire institution. And then there's the faculty and staff. And so I feel good about the potential ripple effects of the work that we do at Pingree, on how it helps our faculty and staff, how it helps our kids, how perhaps it helps our families at home. If we do a great job and we bring out a new sense of awareness or understanding on a topic with a kid, could that kid go home and take it to their parents or to their siblings? I think absolutely, and that's exciting for me, because I think this institution does amazing things for amazing people, and there's no doubt in my mind that some of those people are going to go on and do amazing things for the world. And politics aside, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention that there's an amazing story that has to do with that Adam Rohde that I mentioned before, talking about, he and his head of school at that time, John Hanley, were discussing one day, why Pingree people work here. They could make a lot, so many Pingree teachers could make so much more money in different industries. And again, Adam and John were speculating that, Pingree faculty know that those kids that they're working with could be the president, could be other amazing things and do amazing things for our culture and for our society and for civilization. And I recently learned that Adam Rohde taught an American history class. One of the students in that American history class is federal court judge Michelle Friedland, who was on the initial appellate court judge. She was one of the three judges that heard President Trump's immigration ban. Yeah. So the fact that we've now seen an actual realization of a Pingree faculty, of a Pingree alum, literally changing the course of civilization, is so powerful, and it is so it's a shining light, quite frankly. Again, politics aside, right or wrong, decision or not, the fact that student sat in these classrooms, in these halls, and learned from our people, and likely took some of what she learned I'm certainly was compounded in college and then law school and then in all of her days. But it's pretty amazing to know, again, that we do educate people that will have the opportunity to make huge, profound impacts on the world.
Do you have any other favorite stories of seeing alumni do some pretty amazing things?
Oh man, there's too many. I mean, I am constantly impressed with what our alums do, but I'm even more impressed with our alums' willingness to do for Pingree. Both from the financial perspective, when I was soliciting donations, but also more for the time and talent perspective. I probably cannot count on one hand the number of times in my 5 years in the Alumni Development Office that I called an alum and asked them to help a Pingree student or a Pingree alum, and the answer wasn't yes. Despite how busy people are, despite how committed they are, despite how many balls they have up in the air, they were always willing to help. And that to me was that made me prideful. We talk about Pingree pride. I get a lot of pride when we win a big game on a field, but I also took away so much pride every time an alum in a position of prominence said, yes, I'll speak to that young boy or that young girl, or I'll try to help that alum get a job. And I thought that was just so powerful. So that's not one particular story, but that is the idea of a story that always just brought me great pride about this institution.
What are some of the, I guess, maybe secret sides or less seen sides of the working in alumni relations or in your current position for strategy and operations?
Well, I mean, I would say on the alumni relations side that because this institution has changed so much in, its 160 years or so now, there are alums that have trouble seeing what a great place it is now because it's not the place they remembered.
Right.
So that, I wouldn't say that's the secret side, but I would say that's actually a really fun challenge because very often the alums who initially took this stance that it's not my Pingree, very often those were the alums who given the opportunity to come here, spend some time, meet our students, see the environment, those guys and girls to some extent, but mostly those guys were the ones that could almost become your best supporter pretty quickly. Because once they saw that, no, it wasn't their Pingree, but it's an extension of their Pingree, it's arguably a much better Pingree. And it's a Pingree that does more for more kids today. Those are very, very hard things to argue with. So, it's that initial ignorance of it's not my Pingree versus seeing what the Pingree is and saying, wow, I wish this was my Pingree then. And I'm proud that it's Pingree today. On this side of the aisle, now working over in the business office, again, not a secret, but it is impressive to see the level of study Pingree does of itself and of its peer schools. We spend a tremendous amount of time learning from ourselves and asking others what they're doing and whether there's success or failure there. We collect a tremendous amount of data on peer schools, both local and around this great country, to see how they're doing in terms of the test scores their kids are getting, and then compare that to the curriculum that they offer, and then compare that to the pedagogical style that they teach in. In terms of the financial aspect, learning about the levels of socioeconomic and cultural diversity within classes and within classrooms and within communities in comparison to ours. So I'm still learning a year into this job about the various multitude of ways that we attempt to get out of our own heads and stop just saying we are because we are, but instead saying, well, what do the numbers show? What are our peers doing? How have people succeeded? How have they failed? And looking at colleges, because we are sophisticated like many colleges, and it's pretty clear that a lot of stuff that happens in that level of higher ed happens down at our level of higher ed, some, whether it's 5 or 10 years later, the educational kind of, the waves kind of move from graduate schools to colleges down to us, and then all the way down into the lower levels.
Can you talk about your experience working as a soccer coach at Pingree?
Sure, that's what brings me the most joy. I've talked a lot with folks here at Pingree. That is one of the main things that brought me back. That is one of the main things that has kept me here, and that is the thing that keeps me happiest here. I am not the typical educator in that I don't get to go in the classroom, every day or every other day with students. But I aspire to be an educator in that, I get to go on the field every day with students. And I hope, and I try to treat, the field like a classroom. And I hope that our kids, that our boys are taking away more important lessons from me, and of course from the other coaches, specifically Coach Bellari, the head coach, than just, the tactics and the techniques of soccer. We talk all the time about, what we're doing is nothing but life lessons, and the game of soccer is nothing but an allegory or a metaphor for the game of life. The grit that needs to be developed, the perseverance, the idea of preparation, the hard work and the investment, the reliance on teammates and on colleagues and coaches. I mean, that's all what happens in the real life, in every job in the world. So I am in love with being a coach, and I am proud of the work that our soccer program does. We're not without flaws and failures, and we always also look to improve upon ourselves. But being on the field with the boys, and caring about the boys, and following them throughout their year, their winter, springs, and summers, and being able to speak to them, about what they expect for next year, and then being able to speak with them during the course of a year about, what the work they're putting in and the results they're getting and how it's affecting them as individuals and the teams. For me, that's very special. And for me, that's the feeling, that's the educator, that's the feeling of education that everyone else in this building who teaches classes gets every single day. And that's what I get in that experience. And it is very special for me.
What are some of the differences, I guess, between being coached by Miller Bellari and then working with him as a coach?
Well, you see how much more crazy he is when you work with him than if you no. So Coach, as I said, Coach was profound. Coach is the closest thing I have currently to a father. My father passed away shortly after college when I was in law school, and Coach had been a mentor to me as a coach, as any good coach would be. But having lost my father as a very young man, Coach has served in that role for me. He's the first advisor that I go to when I have a question. So it's been an honor and a privilege for me to be able to work with him, learn from him, and help him. Help support his mission and his goals, and implement his practices and procedures and policies. So when you're a young guy, when you're your age and you're playing for him. What makes Coach so special is that you don't know you're learning so many other things. Mm-hmm. Coach doesn't say, this is all just a life lesson. Coach just speaks in a way that you realize that he's looking at a bigger picture and a bigger goal. But maybe you don't get what it is at that point. Mm-hmm. And then with some time and some distance and perspective, you look back and you realize, oh my goodness, this is a lesson I learned from my coach. So that's been a big. It's been fun for me to be able to support him in that endeavor, but it's also been hard for me because he's got some amazing skills and talents. If every coach in the world could do it the way that Coach would, everyone would, but they can't, and I couldn't. So I'm hoping and trying to learn from him every day. He deals in nuance so well, and he gets right down to the heart of a matter so easily and simply and elegantly. And just genuinely cares about every kid. I mean, it's amazing, That's why we carry such a big roster. We don't cut any junior or senior that tries out for the team, and Coach knows so much about, the worst kid on the team, the kid who never plays a minute in a game. Coach cares about him, wants to know how he's doing in his chem labs, wants to know what he's thinking about for colleges, how his parents are doing at home. And that level of comfort Coach creates within the community is pretty cool. because it allows people to feel like he's a trusted. It is true, but people realize that he's a trusted advisor and he's a caring person in a way that I think is not very common in coaching. Very often the coach is the hard line guy who has a position and, you don't play, so he doesn't like you type of thing. But that's never really the case with any good coach. But it's hard for a good coach to communicate that, your position on the team has nothing to do with your position in his heart. Mm-hmm. And that's something that is something that has been amazing for me to see from the inside and hard for me to learn and emulate. I have to try so hard every day to emulate his best qualities and characteristics so that I can learn from them and I can take them, on and help perpetuate them when and if he's not able to do that anymore.
What are some of your favorite moments, either on the Pingree team as an athlete or as a coach?
My most favorite moment, I can answer this blindfolded in my sleep. My most favorite moment is in the year 2006-07, the fall of 2006, when our boys soccer team went over to Delbarton as a lower seed and beat them on their field. Not only did we beat them, but we came back. We were down 1-0. They scored first. It was a state game, so it was 2:00. So we had no fans there, but our parents, and they had the entire student body. Boys had painted their chests like Braveheart, come over the hill carrying a tree. It was an amazing experience. I show the video of that to the kids every time we go play Delbarton today. I show the video of that game first, so they understand what they're going to be up against. That's my best memory. I distinctly remember that game. I remember crying after that game. That game meant a lot to me because it was my first. That was my it was early on in my coaching career. It ended up being our first state championship with me as an assistant coach. Delbarton had ended my high school soccer career at Pingree. They had beaten me on that field in my senior year. And I had a very distinct memory of my dad being at that game, and my dad had passed away just earlier that year. So for me, it was a very personal moment. That's my best memory. And I still see boys from that team all the time, including, this Saturday at reunion, and we still talk about that moment all the time, and I'll still go on YouTube every now and again and watch that video just for the memory of it. So that was my best moment. I've had a lot of great moments, a lot of great victories, but also a lot of great moments in sadness. Mm-hmm. I've had some great boys, have their careers end in a tough fought loss in a state championship game or in a whatever. And then, gotten a hug from them and had them say, thanks, coach, meant a lot. Being on this team, being a part of this program meant a lot. So that's been pretty cool. It's been very, very cool.
What are some of the big takeaways for the Pingree community that maybe they can learn from the soccer team?
I don't know that anyone can learn anything from the soccer team. We're certainly no model program. Coach is a model in terms of his, humanity and his compassion and his care for the kids. But so many of our programs are so great in their own respects. Mm-hmm. The difference between our program and many others is just the longevity. The fact that, Coach Bellari has been there now for, something like 60 years.
Yeah.
But I would say any coach, Pingree or other, professional coach, any coach could learn from Coach Bellari just in terms of his care and compassion and commitment to the kids. And then I would hope and expect that any coach at Pingree would strive for their program to have a tremendous amount of pride in themselves. And that's something that we talk to our team about a lot. We talk about, pride. They're a part of a bigger thing. They're on a team, but their team is part of a bigger program, and that program is part of a bigger institution. So, I want our kids to be proud of the fact that they're wearing our jersey, and it has our seal on it, and that's the same jersey and the same seal that has been worn by, decades and decades, and in many cases, generations, 2 and 3 generations of people. And there's a lot of history in that uniform, and there's a lot of success, and there's a lot of success because of a lot of hard work. And it's very much the same in any program at Pingree, and non-athletic programs. Our drama department is so strong and so amazing through Al's leadership. Our language studies, everything at this institution is just among the very, very best. So if there's one thing that the soccer program, could teach others, which there's not many things, but if there's one thing, I would say it's pride. Mm-hmm. We are immensely proud of what we have done, And I think everyone at this institution should be and can be.
All right, Mr. Fahey, I'm just about done with all my questions. Do you have any last stories or pieces of advice you might want to give? They could be on anything under the sun. Or I guess the clouds, because it's very foggy outside.
One of my favorite stories, again, you talk about what you know. So I was so very fond of Adam Rohde when he was here. And one of my favorite stories is the speech that I heard him give my first year back at Pingree. He did not give the speech when I was a senior, but in my first year back at Pingree, I heard him give a speech to the senior class at the senior breakfast shortly before graduation, where he used the analogy of the snooze button on your alarm clock, which is funny because it's not really timely. No one has an alarm clock anymore. We all just have alarms on our iPhones. But he talked about how in life it would be amazing if you could train yourself never to hit the snooze button. Get up early in the morning, try a new thing, study something, perfect something, push yourself to a limit, explore, grow. And the whole idea of the snooze button getting in your way was so profound. I went home as a 23-year-old kid at that point, having just graduated from college, and like thought about that and said to myself, this is a practice I want to implement in my life. Get up early in the morning and go do it. And when your alarm goes off and you feel like you could use an extra 15 or 20 minutes of sleep, commit yourself to just getting up and doing what you had planned, because, pushing the snooze button, lets you put off until tomorrow something you could do today. So hearing Rohde give that speech was pretty cool and pretty powerful. And it's something that I try to ascribe to. I do push the snooze button every now and again. But it's something I try to ascribe to, and it's something that I can't wait to try to, teach my kids through modeling and through discussion.
All right, great. Mr. David Fahey, Assistant Director of Operations and Strategic Initiatives, and also Pingree Assistant Soccer Coach, Class of 1999. Mr. Fahey, thank you so much.
Thank you, Sean. Appreciate it.